Excellent. Well, everybody is popping on. We're a little ahead of schedule today, and we've got some guests in person. So just a couple of housekeeping items for participants joining on virtual. You can put questions and answers in the chat feature or the Q&A. We'll get started probably just a little bit after 8:30 and we're kind of right on time today. And we'll go from there. So thanks everybody for joining us. And I was giving some instructions to our in-person audience, but I will, if you guys have any questions or answers or questions or chats, please don't hesitate to put information in there. And we will get started here in about a minute or so once everybody's on, and we're on time today. So that's exciting.
Oh, there we go.
Well, good morning, everybody. We are going to go ahead and start moving things along. I'm trying to make things so that I can do all the things I normally do in a virtual setting, also in an in-person setting. So we have a number of people with us today, both in person and virtually. So thank you all for joining us and having an opportunity to kind of bring back, some of our conversation in person. And we are thrilled to have with us today, Dale Arnold. So thank you, sir, for joining us. Couple of housekeeping items for those who are still kind of popping on, as it is just now 8:32. We are able to answer questions and chats in the actual feature of the Zoom or whatever, Zoom webinar piece. So don't hesitate to raise your hand or put those in. Dale and I will plan to do a question and answer session as soon as he is done speaking. Typically, we have plenty of time for questions, so don't hesitate to put them in anytime as they come up. But certainly this will be a unique opportunity to hear more about what is happening in energy and how it will affect the state of Ohio agricultural system and the industry itself. And so this is an exciting opportunity to have the Farm Bureau kind of talk with us a little bit. Along those lines, for those who are in person, please don't hesitate to raise your hand. I will repeat questions, make sure A, that we got it right, and B, so that Dale can hear, but he can hear you. It just isn't quite as loud. So just as a heads up, on that, we'll stay mostly muted, except for the Q&A session piece. Couple of things about SIFT and this breakfast forum. What used to be called the Ag Breakfast. Everybody's always known it as that. And during the pandemic, we moved it to sort of a virtual setting. And just in the last, 6 or 7 months, we've moved it to a hybrid situation. So we are thrilled to be able to be in person and to have more and more people joining us in person with some coffee and donuts, as well as being able to have speakers from all over the state and guests from all over the state still virtually joining us. So thank you all for that. Ohio MEP is part of a statewide system. SIFT is a partner within that system. We have 6 kind of sister organizations that we work with in helping manufacturers, the food industry and the agricultural industry drive competitiveness and become more efficient at what they're doing inside and outside of their facilities, as well as just with their organizations. So SIFT, as part of the MEP, has a really unique opportunity to provide services, both direct and indirect, in the agricultural industry. We're working with mills and different processors who are able to really drive some new opportunities, do some lean training for their teams as we become more and more efficient due to workforce constraints and other kinds of things. We have really core services, 5 of them specifically around cyber, lean, automation, as well as sustainability in other areas. So MEP gives SIFT a really unique opportunity to do some of that work in the industry and allows us to really talk to the entire state in the food and ag side. So a couple of other notes. We do have some upcoming speakers. This is always the 3rd Thursday of the month. The whole purpose of our forum here is to have some conversation around what's happening from a trends perspective, from an innovation perspective, from just the types of businesses that are coming into Northwest Ohio and the state. And, in the last couple of months, we've had speakers from Aqua Bounty. Last month, we talked with 3 Bar, and here now we have an opportunity to learn from the Farm Bureau and some of the unique things that you guys are seeing in the energy area. So I am going to turn this over to Dale. As I mentioned, if you have questions or just a note or two, don't hesitate to put those in the Q&A and I will help Dale manage all of that. So Dale, your show, sir. Thank you so much for joining us again today.
Well, thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me extremely well. If I'm looking over to the side at my place, I have 3 screens going. I have a screen that shows what you're doing to my right. I have a screen where I'm looking directly at our speakers and different things in the middle, and a screen on the left with my program. But I need to say congratulations, welcome aboard. I'm glad you're here because you're all now going to become part of an energy development process. I've been with the Ohio Farm Bureau for 36 years, 28 in the position I'm at right now with regard to energy development. And I want you to think about this. I don't want you to try to drink from a fire hose today because there's a lot of things happening. This is the start of a conversation. And I've had conversations going on with people I've met over a number of particular years, which means this. The first slide that you're seeing has my contact information, my direct phone number to my office, and my email. If you have any questions whatsoever, please contact me and we'll continue this particular conversation. Also thinking too, when you're talking about energy development and you're talking about energy service providers and utilities, the immediate now time frame that they're looking at to make sure the lights are on and fuel's there is a 30-year time block. They are always looking that far ahead. I remember in the mid to early 90s when I took over this particular position, being in conferences and taking notes, on hearing what I'm hearing with regard to Marcellus Utica Shale, with regard to pipeline development, with regard to transmission line capacity, energy generation, those things. And those people were taking a look at a number of particular things. When I would discuss that with farmers and community stakeholders, they would say, "You're crazy. That's never going to happen." And a few years later, those same people will call me and go, "Can we talk about that again?" A lot of things are happening. And I want you to think about this. When we're talking about energy development, the decisions and things and the policies going forward were not made during the last years of the Obama administration, or not done just now with regard to a piece of legislation. Many of the initial orders to make things happen, many of the initial plans were happening during the last years of the Reagan administration and during the first Bush administration. And many policymakers, many energy service providers are still very much on schedule with regard to the developments we're doing. So you're taking a look at a transition, basically it's happening quite a bit. So let's go ahead and get started. My next slide here, and I think you guys can see this particular slide, hopefully, there it goes, is, I always use this slide and you're seeing basically some technical analysis charts, and farmers really get it because we're in a commodity intensive business: corn, wheat, beans, fuel, fertilizer. Many of our inputs and all the things we produce, prices are determined with regard to commodity exchanges and market conditions, supply and demand over time. Calls, puts, collars, futures contracts, trade arbitration, collars. When you deliver basically corn, wheat, and beans to the local grain elevator, everything is indexed in the system all the way to Chicago Board of Trade, Chicago Mercantile Exchange. That system has basically served us for well over a century. Here on my screen right now, you're taking a look at technical analysis charts for natural gas, electric generation, and crude oil. And just like corn, wheat, and beans, these are commodities too. Calls, puts, collars, futures contracts, delivery points, trade arbitration. Same concept, same system, everything indexed to the New York Mercantile Exchange, where these commodities have been traded for over a century too. As a matter of fact, when you take a look at energy development projects, you are going to be working with a number of service providers that do everything on what's called a merchant plant function. And the one thing I want to tell you too is this, is that things have changed considerably in the 21st century. In the 20th century, when we talked about energy development, the only ones that were really doing it were utilities themselves. And yes, eminent domain provisions did apply. And I think we all can talk to our parents, our grandparents, and our great-grandparents, if they're still with us, about the specter of eminent domain, the legend with regard to that, the experiences that many of our family members had through the years. What I need to tell you this is that energy development right now is a merchant function activity. There are very few projects that are considered vital services projects that are there for national security, that are there to keep the lights on for whatever contingency happens, where eminent domain does apply. Many of these are merchant function. They are going to be selling an energy product as a commodity. And consequently, because it's a merchant function, eminent domain provisions do not apply. Never have, never will. I talk with a lot of our friends and community stakeholders who are saying, well, wait a minute. They're coming here with this energy generation project. They're coming here with this transmission project and different things. And you're telling me eminent domain provisions are not there. That's correct, which means your ability to negotiate, create key stipulations, be at the table as this is being developed in your community is much better than you think. As a matter of fact, when you take a look at the Ohio Power Siting Board, you take a look at FERC and its new Office of Public Participation, the need for community stakeholders, the need for farmers, the need for other members of the community to be involved in this process is becoming more important. Let's take a look here at the next slide, which is coming up. People have asked me, hey, can you give me an apples to apples comparison on how agriculture uses energy? This chart here I've gotten for information from the Energy Information Agency, US Department of Energy, over the years. I had to extrapolate a lot of that particular data, but this is a graphic depiction of agriculture's energy consumption in MMBTUs, in a caloric value, a heat value, from 1970 through 2020. This is not price. Price is much different. This is actual use. And you'll take a look there. Blue is natural gas. Green is distillate or motor fuel. And you're saying, well, gosh, Dale, from 1970 through 2020, the trend basically is going down. And yes, it is. This is not price. This is actual use. Because I remember this 1970s when I bought my first car, a 1967 Ford Fairlane with the largest engine Ford could put under the hood. Man, I wish I still had that car today. AM for a muscle car. I think my first gallon of gasoline was 17 cents. I paid $3.99 yesterday, believe it or not. I found some cheap gas at $3.99 a gallon. That's pricing, but this is actual use. And I want you to think about the cars, the trucks, the combines, the tractors, everything that we've used has become much more energy efficient. And that basically has helped with some of the trend. But I also want you to take a look at red. That's electricity. In the 1970s, when we were baling hay on my grandfather's farm, the power plant on the elevator was a 5-horsepower Briggs & Stratton gasoline engine. And God help you when it was 98 degrees and 98% humidity and that motor got vapor lock. It was not a good day. What did my grandfather switch it out with? Electric motors. And if you take a look at many farms in the state of Ohio, the average number of electric motors doing different functions, different horsepower capacities is between 147 and 165. Electricity, in many cases, has become our fuel of choice, and you're seeing it there. When you take a look at computers, software applications, grain legs, crop conditioners, electricity in many applications where it is cost effective is becoming our fuel of choice. Let's take a look here at the next slide that's coming up. This slide is what you would call local electricity. Local electricity isn't just your county or group of counties or corner of the state. When we talk about local electricity, Ohio is part of a 14-state network. It's called PJM. PJM stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland Interconnection Network. And it's called PJM because that's where this collection, this network of transmission lines and power generation facilities started in the early 20th century, and it's branched out from there. When you're talking about a merchant plant function, when you're talking about trade arbitration and delivery points, when you're talking about market-based delivery systems in energy, electricity, literally, it is this particular system. PJM is our independent service operator. And that's how the system basically was established. People are always asking too, why are we seeing so many energy development projects in Ohio? Natural gas-fired turbine generation in the east, solar right now in west and north central Ohio. PJM is divided into a number of transmission circuits. The further east you go into the system to the eastern seaboard, the vast majority of those circuits are fully subscribed. There is no more additional capacity or room to put additional power generation into the system. The further west you go, especially into Ohio, there are a number of circuits that still have open capacity, still have room to safely, efficiently, effectively put power generation into the system. That's why they are here. As a matter of fact, under Ohio Power Siting Board policy and rules, if you wanted to develop a power generation project of any size or type here in Ohio under their jurisdiction, you have to identify a very specific circuit in PJM. You have to work with PJM, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and the North American Electric Reliability Council, FERC, NERC, and PJM, and do basically an interconnection study, technical, safety, design work, and it takes about 36 to 48 months and about $2 million to complete that study. And you need to have basically a certificate. You need to have a right of interconnection into a very specific circuit. And consequently, once you have that, you'll be given a queue number and identified and have room to be in the system. I tell many folks who are working with energy service providers, ask them these particular questions, and they should be able to give it to you as a matter of public record. What's the name and the number of the circuit you're interconnecting into, and what is your PJM queue number? If you have that, you know these folks basically are serious. And you also want to work with the folks who are, quote, going to be owning the metal, going to be owning the project. Who has that certificate? Because the person who has that is ultimately going to be your business partner. You might work with subcontractors. You might work with land agents. That's fine. But you always have the power and ability to work directly with the developer of the project. Let's take a look at the next slide here. This is also from the EIA, and this is a graphic depiction of what's happening with regard to coal and coal plant retirements. This is a graphic depiction of coal retirements between 2012 and 2016. That one picture there is in Conesville, Ohio, Coshocton County, where the Conesville generating system has been decommissioned and the towers went down here a few months ago. It was fascinating to watch. But what we need to tell and let people understand is that there are some types of technology that are transitioning out and others that are transitioning in this 30-year process. And I'm going to tell you, 3 out of every 5 coal power generation facilities in Ohio, the Appalachian Plateau, and parts of the United States have been fully decommissioned, closed, retired, and are gone. If you drive between Portsmouth and Pittsburgh on Ohio Route 7 on the Ohio River, count the smokestacks. There used to be 25 or 26 of those generation facilities as little as 15 to 20 years ago. There are 3 left. 2 of those are now slated to be closed and decommissioned by 2025, leaving just 1. A number of things are happening in the coal industry. You also need to take a look at this. Nuclear. Are people revisiting nuclear energy? Could you see this coming to Ohio in some way, shape, or form? It is something basically that needs to be discussed and explored because energy service providers are taking a look at that. This is a picture of a small modular reactor. It is much different than the reactors we're seeing in nuclear plants that are now being retired now. They're small, they're portable. Some can actually be brought in basically on the back of a truck. They're very similar to the nuclear plants that you see in aircraft carriers, ships. There are a number of energy service providers and utilities looking at this as a cost-effective alternative to bringing new technology, bringing new generation into areas. You have some cooperatives in the northern panhandle of Idaho that are using some of these. You have some companies that 35 to 40 years ago retired their nuclear plants exploring this technology again. Could energy service providers take a look with regard to this? The answer is very much yes. I've been in some of those particular discussions. It'll be something people will need to talk about, explore, and take a look at going forward. Here's another one. We talk about oil and gas. This is a picture of the Buell well. This is one of the first horizontal drilling arrays established in Ohio. And in its first month of production, it eclipsed all oil and natural gas production in state history with regard to the production there. If you have the opportunity to go through Eastern Ohio and take a look at the Marcellus and Utica Shale drilling development areas, it's amazing what's happening there. In parts of Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, Northern West Virginia, if we could become a nation unto ourselves, we could join OPEC. The amount of natural gas fire turbine generation as a result of that, there are 42 of those facilities being taken a look at that, using this as fuel. The oil that is coming from there is part of the market, but it is much different than West Texas intermediate crude that you use for fuel production. It's good for plastics, polymers, pharmaceuticals, those things, which I'll get to in a minute. But you're seeing that. As a matter of fact, this is only one of 3 places in the world that, regardless of gas and oil prices, low or high, you still see development and drilling activity. And we work with a number of our friends and neighbors in a number of counties in Ohio with regard to those particular issues. Natural gas fire turbine development, as I said before, it's interesting that a lot of shale oil and gas development is being used in the 21st century with regard to fuel development. Coal is being replaced by natural gas fired turbine generation. This is a picture of the Guernsey Power Station being built near Cambridge. There are 42 of these projects throughout the Appalachian Plateau. Ohio has become a leader in natural gas production. And this technology has been around for about 45 to 50 years, but in the latter part of the 20th century and the first part of this century, they were for peaking capacity. They could be brought on very quickly and up to speed when there was a spike demand in the summer and in the winter for electric generation in the system. These are now becoming baseload power generation facilities that can be used 7, 24, 365, and are now part of that particular mix. Many communities are working with energy service providers, taking a look at installation of these particular assets, taking a look at this infrastructure, taking a look at the pipeline systems which supply fuel to it. Long-term relationships and things are being talked about with that regard to that too. You also need to take a look at this. This is also an oil and gas. As I said before, when you take a look at the natural gas and the oil in Ohio, it's much different chemically. It's good for plastics, polymers, pharmaceuticals, a number of products we use on a daily basis. And the natural gas has ethane. It has several different rare gases in regard to that. You're hearing a lot about cracking, refining, and different facilities at SIO and other places being established in Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, Northern West Virginia communities. Our folks are working very closely with them. Ohio State University Extension with the energy research team that I have a lot of members and friends with. We're constantly talking, discussing, taking a look at a number of those. We've actually seen one site in Shadyside, Ohio, that was the burger generation facility 10 years ago with coal. It was decommissioned, torn down. You're taking a look at a site to be becoming an ethane cracker. If you take a look at the Ohio River region, from Wheeling down through Marietta to Portsmouth, it was known for years in the earlier oil and gas plays as a chemical industry, as a refining industry, as plastics, pharmaceuticals, and much of that industry is talking about coming back into the Ohio area. Those discussions also are going on with our folks. Once you take a look at this, this is wind and solar. Many of our folks in Western Ohio are now part of that. There are over 40 different projects under evaluation with the Ohio Power Siting Board. There are 8 counties that are now working with energy developers who are taking a look at projects between 20 and 49.9 megawatts, which are very large, industrial, but do not come under Power Siting Board jurisdiction. There are 7 different aspects that need to be evaluated before they're given a permit for convenience, public need, and necessity. Viability of Ohio farmland is one of the 7. Having basically to prove convenience, public need, necessity, working with community leaders is huge. Many people are finding out that that whole system is a judicial process where evidence instead of hearsay comes into play. Also there, the ability for them to be involved in stipulations, agreements, and party of record proceedings with the Ohio Power Siting Board is absolutely huge. And people are finding out in Ohio, there's no such thing as cookie cutter rules. Each one of these projects is a separate project unto itself. In the judicial process with the Ohio Power Siting Board, they are all evaluated individually. Yes, there's a uniform set of rules for all power generation in all 88 counties, but they are all individual projects and have to be cited, have to be considered individually based on the unique needs of a community. And many of our members, many farmers, many community stakeholders need to be involved in discussion of the aspects of the community that need to be addressed if a project of that magnitude and things come in. I also need to tell you this, that map will continue to, the points will continue to go further east. You're seeing 2 right now in Columbiana and in Harrison County. If you take a look at PJM and the Q list, there's another 30 projects, megawatt scale, solar, that are going to be considered for development in that part of the state. So we're not through with that type of development by a long shot. Hydrogen is the next thing we need to think about. There are a number of folks who are taking a look at hydrogen because yes, natural gas is a fossil fuel. We have around a 40 to 50 year supply of it left based on normal 20th century use. But in the 21st century, if we're talking about methane for motor fuel and different things for cars and trucks, applying it to full-scale power generation, the 30-year time block I was talking about with energy service providers, all that comes into play. What will replace methane when it becomes into short supply? You're taking a look at hydrogen right now. There are a number of leaders and community stakeholders in this state that are working to create a hydrogen development hub in Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. They're in competition with another group in California, another one in Texas, another one in the Dakotas. We have this huge pipeline system, which Ohio was part of. You can see there with the blue map at the lower right of the pictures. We're a storage state where we've been storing natural gas and pipeline systems for well over a century. And so we have a leadership position with regard to that. Hydrogen can be produced through electrolysis. Blue hydrogen uses natural gas, coal, methane with regard to that. Pink, nuclear generation capacity could be used for hydrogen production. And green, solar, wind with regard to that. And while all people are taking a look at it, if you put the transmission lines for pipelines on a map with the map you're seeing on solar, it does not take long to see that several energy service providers are taking a look at 1, 2, 3 different types of projects. Could you see a solar project for electric generation? Also doing hydrogen production, putting it into an interstate pipeline for storage, and other folks in this region using it? Yes, you could. And so that's other parts of the discussion we need to take a look at. As a matter of fact, this is the Long Ridge Energy project in Monroe County. It's a 400 megawatt generation facility. It is operational and they're using hydrogen. If you take a look at the permits for natural gas fired turbine generation stations right now, if you read through their permits, they're hybrid technologies. They can use a mix of hydrogen and methane. And as soon as hydrogen is available 100%, they can switch to that. That's a viable option for a number of folks, something that needs to be discussed and explored. Coal. Next thing here is coming. There we go. If you take a look at coal, Ohio over the last century and a half, since the late 1800s, has been a leader with regard to coal production. We've seen all sorts of mining in Eastern Ohio, both shaft mining as well as strip mining. Could you see that type of mining returning to this state? The answer is yes, in some way, shape, or form. We still have coal mining going on with regard to that. We still have discussions, and rightfully so, with regard to repair, remediation, and environmental protection of ground around those particular facilities. But this is also happening. You hear a lot about energy storage. You hear a lot about battery systems for EVs, as well as energy storage, which I'll get to in a minute, for electric production, rare earths, lithiums, and other rare earth metals that are used for advanced battery technology. Science has showed us that the veins directly above and below a coal seam are rich in those types of metals. For the last 10 to 15 years, I've talked to several companies who've come into the state and saying, Mr. Arnold, I got a question for you, and I was referred to you as, we have a map here that shows where all of the old coal mines were, and we know where all the old slag piles and waste piles are. We want to have the ability to mine them again, gather that waste product, and take a look at rare earth extraction. What are some of the things we need to take a look at? What are some of the things we need to address with communities? Those types of discussions need to go forward. Could be we seeing a serious revisit of mining operations in Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. Given those scenarios, that's a huge possibility. Let's take a look about what's on the farm. You know, it's interesting. You talk about pipelines as infrastructure. You talk about electric transmission lines, which are being upgraded and refitted. Huge. There are 20 projects in Southern Ohio and another 10 in Northern Ohio where that entire system is being refitted. You're taking a look at energy storage facilities. The picture on the lower left is a picture of an energy storage system. We actually have a permit for what is called Flint Grid Energy Storage. It's part of what you're seeing with Intel in New Albany. It's with the Power Siting Board. It's actually a large energy storage system where electricity can come in, be stored in a battery type of arrangement, and then be used further down the line with heavy industry, communities, and other consumers. Will you be seeing that type of technology here? The answer is yes. A lot of this will be going on open farm ground, leases, easements, protection of farm ground and resources, protection of subsurface field tile, accommodating a number of needs basically on a farm, in a neighborhood, with the community. We've all been involved in those discussions over the last 10 years with ET Rover, Nexus, Kinder Morgan. What you've learned in working with one energy service provider is going to serve you extremely well when you have the opportunity and the need to talk to other energy service providers who are bringing other types of technology in. And this is for all communities in this particular state. No one is immune. We are all going to be seeing some type of energy development project coming forward or refit, all the way down to the local distribution level. And you're part of this right now, because if you take a look at that electric meter, many electric meters have been switched out. They are no longer the analog meter on the side of the house. They are a digital two-way communication device. And your relationship with your utility because of that will change. As a matter of fact, let's take a look at the next slide here. Many utilities are becoming what are called platform companies, which means electricity is a commodity. You'll be able to buy your commodity, your electric supply, from any one of a number of approved service providers. We are still there to make sure the local distribution system delivers that to your particular home, farm, or business for your needs. But we're also going to be offering you a number of other services, software programs, variable speed motors, advanced HVAC systems, energy efficient and management systems. Many farmers are going to be taking a look at those to give them different strategies to control their energy costs. I was at a a hearing with a local public utility that's talking about an increase in their rate structure. An older gentleman got up and talked about and complained that he didn't like this and he thought things should remain the same. And he didn't think basically they should readjust their rates. A person on the other side of the table representing the companies, and it's the first time I've seen this, actually asked the gentleman a question. Where do you live? You have this meter. Have you seen the different platform services and things basically that we are now offering you to control your energy costs? That's an issue and concern for a number of folks. I sit on some of those councils with AEP basically as an advisor and different things. We're finding this out is that even though you have a digital two-way communication device as a meter, the average age of an electric customer in many parts of AEP service territory is in their mid-50s. I'm 62, and I need to tell you this. Even though I work with this stuff, I still can't program the box on my cable or my television. I get my grandson, Augie, who's 9 years old, to do that for me. Give him a Snickers bar, he can control the whole house. Education is going to be huge. Many people, especially older folks, are uncomfortable with this type of technology. Our children, and especially our grandchildren, are not. Helping that transition is huge because what this gentleman said from the utility, well, sir, that's fine. If you're able to use and adapt to this type of technology, there are some energy saving things there where you control your costs. If you choose not to use these platform services, we're going to have a rate for that too. Things to think about, things to discuss, taking a look at education, taking a look at how this can be easily usable, thinking about making this as user-friendly as possible is absolutely huge. You're also going to see this. My friend Jordan Haywisher at Farm Bureau has says this, and I'm going to quote him. He says, you know, in the 20th century or the early part of the 20th century, the mantra was 40 acres and a mule. In the early part of the 21st century, it's 1,000 acres and a robot. The number of technologies that are coming to the farm, they're going to be taking a look at, you know, autonomous vehicles such as tractors that you see in the lower left, bots that are going to be able to do robotic functions between rows of corn and different things and analyze insect control, fertilizer control, all those, drone technology, taking a look at EV and other liquid fuel vehicles and applications is all going to be huge and are all going to be decisions that we, our children, and especially our grandchildren are going to have to take a look at, face, use with regard to farming operations, controlling basically production, managing a farm, controlling energy costs. We also need to remember our community's history. In the eastern part of the state, and I grew up in the eastern part of the state, you talked about coal mining, a number of shaft mines, a number of strip mine areas, repair, remediation is going on. There are 2.6 million acres that need to be repaired. Having plans, resources, doing those things in Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania are still absolutely huge with regard to that. I also want you to take a look at the picture on the upper left. Looks like there's some oil rigs out in the middle of the water. That's the first offshore oil rig in the world. It was not in the Gulf of Mexico. It was in Grand Lake St. Mary's near Salina, Ohio. And there were over 100 of them on that lake. If you're talking where SIFT is sitting right now in Bowling Green area and in Wood County, there were 6,000 oil wells there in the early part of the 20th century. Many of them are below ground where repair and remediation are going to be needed and decommissioning are going to be done. Plans, policies, programs to help us remediate still things from the early part of the 20th century is absolutely positively huge. And we still need to be part of those particular discussions going forward. Moving along here, we also need to take a look at things beyond the production of raw materials. Plastics, polymers, pigments, pharmaceuticals, machine parts are all part of this particular mix. Do we want to become a raw material producer, or do we also want to invest in the companies that use the feedstock and manufacture a number of consumer goods and services going forward? How are those going to impact our communities? What kind of jobs are we going to see? How can we basically strike a balance between an industrial capacity as well as agriculture? What plans do we need to take a look at 10, 20, 30 years down the line? Those discussions need to be done. Many folks in economic development, many folks in community development, many community stakeholders need to be involved in those discussions too. You're seeing this. Like I say, here's third generation. We're talking about Intel in Licking County. That was not an if, it was a when, because when you take a look at the infrastructure going into that area, it was going to accommodate an industry. If it wasn't Intel, it would have been someone else. Battery backup systems, manufacturing of vehicles. When you take a look at Lordstown, that used to be a GM-centered area, that plant now basically is with Lordstown Motors. The Mahoning Valley is restructuring itself into the EV Valley. Battery production, raw material refining, manufacturing of vehicles, all those plans basically going forward. What is going to be the impact of the region? It's interesting when we talk about farms, we're multi-generational. Grandfather is usually the patriarch who has the farm. He has his entire income there. Dad, my age, is a combination of both. And the grandson and the other kids that want to come onto the farming operation have, and in many cases, need a job in town to supplement their income. We have many places that are taking a look at, if we want agriculture to survive and go into other generations, we need to have economic opportunities there for our children and our grandchildren to be able to adapt and be part of, so they can transition fully into the farming operation. How should that be done? What plans need to be in place? Some of those discussions happen at the kitchen table, and some happen in meeting rooms at the county courthouse. We're all part of those conversations. Infrastructure, high-speed internet, transportation resources, and rail and truck pipelines, all those are coming into play. Some of those particular discussions impact not only the industry, but also agriculture. It doesn't take long, basically, when we talk about finding enough hopper cars to move corn further west in the markets at times is absolutely huge. Do we need to work with others on those transportation assets and different things because of industry and agriculture both needing them? The answer is yes. We want to have high-speed internet. What's interesting is that if I have a son and his job is in Columbus, if he had high-speed internet and can do his job from home in Hocking County, he could be there to help me on the farm, be part of the farm, as well as still work his job in Columbus at the same time. The number of people who want to do that with their families, especially in the eastern parts of the state where this technology really needs to be further established, is absolutely huge. This is also part of the development. People need to ask this: you're here, you're creating this project, you're creating this industry, you're creating this business. How is it going to benefit my family? How is it going to benefit my county and my township? How is it going to benefit my schools? How are you going to invest in a number of vital services, both for social and recreation, law enforcement, healthcare, community development? Many of those discussions need to go on. Many of those discussions are being done in many parts of the state, and we need to be at the table to talk and plan those, because that's also an important part of this investment. Knowing the public hearing process, knowing that many processes and permits are a matter of public record and follow judicial proceeding are huge. If energy development was a popularity contest, which some people want to make it, we'd all be sitting in the cold and in the dark. Understanding our rights and responsibilities to be part of that as a party of record are absolutely huge. And we spend a lot of time at Farm Bureau helping people, some who welcome this technology and others who have some very serious questions and concerns, and rightfully so, be involved in the process. We are well beyond the age of locking the gate and getting the shotgun out and saying, leave me alone. Those things basically cannot happen anymore. We all need to be part of the process. We all need to be part of the discussion, and rights and abilities and opinions all need to be heard. Civil order still needs to reign supreme. Farm Bureau, I'm going to make it very simple. Welcome to my world. Our policy is we support energy projects that involve the project developer, utilities, regulatory agencies, government at the local, state, federal level. We recognize the rights of landowners to enter into effective partnerships and agreements. These efforts should focus on creation of projects that address environmental concerns, consider aesthetic needs, provide economic benefits to the landowner's community. Transparency is absolutely positively huge, where everyone knows what's going on and everyone has a seat at the table. That's it for me with regard to that. Again, this is my slide. If you want to continue the conversation and different things, please give me a call. Welcome to my world. And again, welcome to an energy development. I'm glad you're here. Elizabeth, back to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I think, there are definitely some areas where you hit on a couple of things that registered in terms of what it is that we as a community need to be doing. And so I think conversations like this and being able to engage with one another across the state gives us a really unique opportunity to talk about how everyone can benefit from understanding more about the industry and what we can look forward to, but what needs to be put into place from an infrastructure and community perspective. So thank you for making those points very obvious. So that's great. Any questions? This is a perfect opportunity to kind of gather up some information and answer any questions that everybody has. A couple came in while you were kind of introducing some things, and so I will send those over to you specifically. One is about an opportunity with some property that someone owns, and so they will touch base with you on that.
Okay.
And then, one thing that kind of came to my mind is from infrastructure readiness. What are the things in the different parts of the state should we, your average citizens be doing? Are there particular things that you feel would best suit, particularly Northwest Ohio or, even kind of the eastern part of the state?
Yeah, I'd say this because I'm thinking about on a farm right now. I'm thinking about challenges that we're going to have. I'm thinking about electric delivery. One thing I've told folks with regard to EV vehicles and different things, if you wanted to put charging stations or infrastructure there on the farm or whatever, does the local distribution system, is it large enough? Is it robust enough to handle those? And that's not only with EVs, but when you're taking a look at our use for electricity and different things into the future with HVAC, with a number of programs, electric motors, those things, is the local infrastructure, the distribution system robust enough? That's great basically for discussion with the representatives of your utility or your cooperative. What plans do you have in place to serve my needs into the future long range for the next 30 years? What is the cost of that going to be? How can that be managed? With the cooperatives and different things there, you are a member, an investor at the same time. You need to be involved in those particular discussions. You need to help basically your local cooperatives, your electric service providers and things, look at those things, plan, let them know what your needs, wants, and desires are. And so that's for local distribution infrastructure. When you're taking a look at the farm, platform services, this is absolutely positively huge. If you want to control your energy costs in the future, if you want to control functions on the farm, if you want to be able to buy energy more efficiently and effectively over time, like an industry has the ability today, investing in software packages, investing in appliances, investing in systems are huge. There are a number of service providers there to help you. Some of those service providers are like engineers. They're going to be able to sit down with you at your kitchen table in your office, take a look at your usage patterns, and suggest and advise you on different programs and functions, from on-site solar on the roof of the barn to an energy system using VG chips in your appliances to help you control those costs. And there are others, especially over the last 5 to 6 years, that are like used car salesmen. Being able to understand, appreciate, and ask key questions, being able to determine who is the engineer working for you from the used car salesman is absolutely huge. Those are management things on the farm that you want to take a look at, and we can help you with. The other things are going to be, you have a lot of discussions that need to go on local, state, and in some cases, federal level for the systems.
So that's a great segue into Richard's question here. Do you have recommendations for legal entities that could help guide owners through the legal process and into the future? So, you know, who are the people that the successors need to do to handle cleanup?
Yes, we do. It's interesting. Over the last 10 to 15 years, well, almost 20 years now, we have a legal referral list. If you need that, give me a call, or your county farm bureau office can send that to you. We have them for oil and gas. We have them for wind and solar. We have them for other types of energy generation. We have them for family planning. If you choose one of those particular service providers, please rest assured, I get no kickback, no remuneration, no free lunch. They're there for you to use. There's 12 to 15 on each list, which means you can shop and find someone that best fit your needs. They're constantly being evaluated. We've removed some of them because they went to the dark side of the force. And what I tell folks is this: energy development and services and programs are very serious business. You need to have the same frame of mind as you would when you buy a $250,000 combine, an additional piece of farm ground, or sign a marriage license. Don't sign something like this on the hood of a pickup truck, because in 6 months you're going to find out, oh my God, there's something I forgot.
Absolutely.
Don't do that. But no, we can help you with that too.
Awesome. We have a question in person.
Yeah, you just mentioned it's serious business. And I think it's also business that we need to use the right words. So when you were talking about natural gas, you talked about methane and you talked about natural gas. Mm-hmm. And I suggest that we differentiate between fossil gas and biogas. They're both methane. But if we abandon natural gas completely, we have no place to put the gas from digesters, from animal manure digesters, from other kinds of renewable natural gas. So I like to put in our vocabulary the word fossil gas and renewable gas, so that we can differentiate between the things that we would like to reduce the use of and the things that we'd like to encourage.
I am so glad that you asked that question, because I'm telling you this, I'm involved in discussions and arguments right now. You know, we have some folks who really like one particular type of technology, and sometimes that can be very nearsighted. With methane, you're correct. You can make methane and natural gas using a variety of sources. And yes, I work with a lot of folks who are basically creating biogas and biofuel functions right now from renewable resources with anaerobic digestion and those things. We have a movement with some folks going, we really don't need natural gas anymore. We don't like fracking. And so what we are doing is we're getting every municipality and every government entity to bar pipeline and infrastructure development for delivery of methane and different things. And I'm going, you don't want to do that, because we have biogas functions And we're also going to be having hydrogen. You are still going to need pipelines and that type of infrastructure to deliver renewable gas and hydrogen and other types of gaseous technologies and fuels, the points where they are needed. Barring that type of development right now, you're going to be cutting somebody's throat.
Correct.
So I'm glad you asked that question.
Yeah, and I'd like to also substitute the words that we use in the water industry for point source and non-point source.
Yes.
If we could use that in the natural gas industry, those cities that are trying to outlaw natural gas furnaces, they're talking about non-point sources. But the power generation using natural gas is actually a point source where that carbon dioxide could be collected.
That's correct.
You also use the words peaking unit and natural gas and kind of as if they were the same. But the new hybrid natural gas plants can operate as load following. They're not necessarily base load. And we need to point those out as being a very positive part of the natural gas system.
You're correct. Now you know why I had that picture of the Guernsey power station in there, because that mixture of things. I hope I brought that across there, but I really like the questions you have with regard to that. And like you say, I really appreciate if you can be there when we have these discussions, basically at a local level, and talk about these things. You're very well aware of things and you understand some of the issues, concerns, needs for this type of discussion. Welcome to my world. I'm glad you're here.
We had one more in here.
Yes. Are you familiar with House Bill 450, which speaks to community scale solar projects?
Yes.
So can you speak to that?
I'm very familiar with regard to that. I'll tell you also too, is that I also represent farmers on Green Energy Ohio, their board of directors, and advocate our position and our policies there, as well as other areas in that community. I'm very familiar with House Bill 450. I'm very familiar with Solar Neighbors United. There is a tremendous amount of potential there to be able to take a look at that. The logistics with regard to interconnection is one of those things that need to be done. They're taking a look at brownfield. They're taking a look at rooftop solar. They're taking a look at sharing resources, especially for folks who don't have the space or the room to do those particular types of things. They're talking about Southeastern Ohio and strip mine use. All those things are good. We have a tremendous amount of policies. As a matter of fact, the policies that I shared there, many of our policies take a look at. I'm working with Brandon Kern and our team. We're taking a look at that. We are monitoring the situation. And there's some potential there, basically, if it's structured correctly, to be another step on helping people find strategies to control their energy costs. So that's what's going on there too. That's what I know and can talk to you about today.
We did have two additional questions on virtual, just real briefly, because I know we're coming up on 9:30. One, I think you've already kind of addressed, which was, from Lori Dyer at Rhodes, really after siting is done, is it too late to ask those community questions? And, if somebody's actively starting a project, at what point should people be getting involved in those kind of community-based discussions, and how would they know that they're happening?
Good question, because I tell you this, some companies are very good at community involvement and others are not. As soon as you find out about a project, it's time to start discussion. Seek out basically the energy service provider, start asking those questions. Seek out your community leaders, your township trustees and county commissioners, start asking them if they know about these particular projects. Urge them to invite energy service providers in as a matter of public record to discuss those things with them. And I tell a lot of these companies that come and see me early because their legal counsel advises them to do so, I say this: you're investing a lot of money in a project in Ohio. Let me tell you about where you need to do some investment. For every dollar that you spend early in the project to inform, educate, discuss with community stakeholders where you're going to go, and create that project that basically enhances or accommodates a number of individual needs of that community. For every dollar you spend on that type of outreach early is going to save you $20 in litigation on the other side of the process.
Fair enough.
That needs to be done.
Yeah. And then another one that you kind of addressed in the course of the conversation around hydrogen-based energy production. For some of that localized application, you know, fuel cell technology development, how does that fit in? And, you know, is that something that you can comment on?
Yeah, it is. When you're talking about hydrogen, many folks are looking at it as a fuel to enhance or utilize or blend with methane or natural gas, both bio as well as fossil. Also, too, when you take a look at fuel cell technology, solid cell fuel technology, Cleveland and Akron are leaders with regard to that. Dr. Benson Lee has worked on that for a number of years. Are there a number of applications to be able to use that on the farm? The answer is yes, especially going into the future. And needing access to that fuel to make it so is going to become incredibly important.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for all of your help and taking the time to present with us today. We had a great in-person audience, and we're very grateful that you all came down. And you know, as I mentioned, SIFT, you know, we don't do this, you know, outside of, you know, this activity, and we meet every third Thursday of the month to kind of talk about different topics. If you have suggestions, questions, opportunities of interest for, you know, different conversations, we can certainly always invite Dale back and other members and other organizations. And we don't pull this off without the support of our members. So we really appreciate Farm Bureau's continued support of SIFT, as well as the soy and corn associations and checkoff dollars, and the American Dairy Mid-East. So SIFT has, you know, been in business for about 25 years. This is our 13th year of doing this agribusiness conversation. And so we're really excited to be able to bring back speakers and talk further about how what's happening in the industry, and how Manufacturing Extension Partnership, the state program, MEP, and SIFT can be useful in helping to educate on these topics. So thank you, Dale, for joining us, and everyone else. We will look forward to seeing you here in a couple of weeks on the 21st of April. Talk to you all soon.
Bye-bye, everybody.